Okay, everyone. By my clock, it's 6 o'clock. So, shall we go ahead and get started with the webinar? Um, First off, my name is Josh Roberts, Mitigation Coordinator with Larimer County out of the Office of Emergency Management. And if you are here looking for some information on our Community Mitigation Grant Program, then you're in the right spot. We'll be spending the next almost hour or so roughly talking about it. And there'll be plenty of time for some questions if you guys got questions. If you're here by accident, it's okay. Stick around. I might tell a joke or two. You might have a good time. Just let me confirm you guys do have my audio. Can I get a thumbs up? Perfect. All right. Um, so let's just jump right into it. Purpose and agenda of the webinar today is really we just want to give um, people just some general information about our grant program, some insights into why we have structured it in the way that we do. We'll actually walk through the application process together, so you guys will get a sense of how that works. And of course, we'll provide some opportunity for Q&A. Obviously, if you have not participated in our grant program before, if you haven't been a recipient of it, your neighborhood or community, then this might be super helpful for you to know what you're getting into and just an opportunity to ask some questions. We really, y'all, with this grant program, we want to do our level best to just reduce some barriers to access in the program. So we want to make it approachable. You guys will probably hear me say a couple of times tonight. And so let this be the first time I say it. Reach out anytime, email or call. I'm happy to talk with you guys, walk you through maybe some ideas that you have, and just give you some insights again as to why we ask for things that we do. So you'll see on your screen here, quick agenda overview of the program. We'll talk about some eligibility and limitation sort of things. Um, I'll go over the evaluation criteria, and that's going to be important that you really know those things when you write your application, so you can put together a pretty competitive application. I'll give you some insights on some just important administration items that we have. We can also walk through some example projects. And for those of you that have been a recipient of this grant program before, I certainly welcome your insights as well, and your ideas as well. It might be helpful for the newcomers to the program. And then, of course, we'll just reiterate and we'll hit on some important dates just to make sure everybody's clear on the application due dates and things of that nature. So before I move on to the next slide, um, the poll, I'm going to end it here pretty soon, but if you see the poll, feel free to take that if you haven't taken it. Really gives me a sense of how many people are here who are new to the program versus how many people are seasoned veterans. And at the moment, it looks like 36% of people who've responded, this is your first time. And so that's great. 50% of you, you've done it before. And then 14% of you, you're just not sure how to answer, and that's fine too. So I'm going to go ahead and end the poll. All right. So just a heads up, webinar is being recorded. We'll hang the recording, a link to it on our webpage in the days that follow this call on our Community Mitigation Grant webpage. So you can go back and review, or certainly if folks who weren't able to jump on, they can jump on and get some information. Feel free to use the chat tool in Zoom here on your taskbar. Also, feel free to raise your hand, the little Zoom hand emoji there if you got a question. And then just happy to call on you, unmute. I'm a pretty informal guy myself, so I got some information to get through, but I'll certainly make sure to take a number of pauses just to see if there's any questions about some particular topics. But honestly, if something's just really burning, in your brain and you want to get the question out or you want to get it out, just go ahead anytime. Stop me. It's not a big deal at all. And of course, if you've got any technical issues with listening to the Zoom or Not really sure what button to click. That's okay. Just give me a shout, whenever you want in the next handful of days or so. I'm happy to talk through, any of this stuff with you. So the first step, especially for the folks that might be new to our grant program here, let me just give you a quick overview. So the Community Mitigation Grant Program, it was actually created in 2022. And so this cycle, the 2026 annual cycle, is the fifth cycle of the grant program. We cycle these grant programs annually. So we'll open up application periods just like we're doing now towards the front of the calendar year. And then the expectation is by November timeframe, and I'll give you some dates here later on, specific dates, even specific times, 11:59 p.m. on a specific date. But we close the grant program in November timeframe towards the end of the year, and then we'll just start the whole thing over if we have funding available to provide through the program. Why do we have this program? Two really, really important things I want to say to that. We know in our industry, in our field of study of practice, disaster mitigation, emergency management, disaster response and recovery, that research shows that risk reduction work, so mitigation work, has a positive benefit cost. So spend a little bit of money on the front end to save potentially an exponential amount, on the back end. Empirically based, peer reviewed. If you're interested, I can send you some of those papers. And if you want some light reading, National Institute of Building Sciences has about a 600-page book I can send to you as well if you really just looking to get some sleep at night. Here's another thing that we know that empirically based, peer reviewed science research tells us is that social capital, so that is the ties that bond us together in our community, that improves resilience. If we have strong ties, then we're better positioned to withstand the shocks and stresses that life will throw at you, right? To include a disaster. It's kind of common sense, right? It takes a village. There's a reason why that adage exists, and we got some sciencey papers and big words that says the same thing. But that is what we want to do with our grant program. Is we want to essentially increase both of those things: the amount of mitigation that's done in the county because we know its benefits, and we want to increase social capital in our county, in our communities, in your neighborhoods, because we know what that means for you guys and for our residents and visitors, during and after disaster. Y'all, those are really the two foundational principles as to why this program exists. And so what we see really as, the funding that we provide through this grant program, it's not just, an investment in that risk reduction work in your neighborhoods and that mitigation work, right? That has a positive return on investment, but it's also an investment into that fabric that we call our community and the ties that bond us together, the building of the resilience, in your neighborhoods and in our communities. And so, just the funding that we have through this program. Obviously, wish we had a lot more to go around, but we make our best do with what we got, and really it's to just help remove some of those upfront or financial barriers that you guys might have in your neighborhoods, at that neighborhood scale, at that community scale, to doing these two things: increase in mitigation activity and work, and increase in social capital. That's really the purpose of the grant program. However, I do have a fancy video I kind of want to show you guys, especially for the folks that are new to the program. So I'm going to click this. I'm going to stop sharing, and I'm going to click a link, and then we're going to see if this works. Stand by. If it doesn't work, I'll send the link out later. All right, let's see. Let's play this thing. Can you guys hear it? Give me a thumbs up or a thumbs down.
I can't hear anything.
Can't hear it?
Nope.
I couldn't hear it either. Brad Bowman. Hi, Cheryl.
Hi. We can hear
I
you, Josh, but not Lori Hodges.
gotcha. Well, I tell you what, I'm going to put this in the chat. So if you want to grab that, copy and paste it into another browser or document, watch it later. It's just about a 3-minute video that gives you an overview, sort of the same overview I just gave you, but in a fancier format and with less of an accent. Wow, let me get my slides going again. Some of you have probably already seen the video. It's also on our webpage, so you can always access it there. All right, moving on. One of the other things,
What's Josh? Sorry, what's the name of the video?
I tell you what, let me stand by, y'all. I don't know if it really has a name. It might be I got too many screens, y'all. Almost there. There you go. Community Mitigation Grant Program, Larimer County Emergency Management. Thanks, Craig. The video is also, you'll see it on our story map here if that other link didn't work for you. All right. All right, you should see the PowerPoint slides and we'll get back in business. Great. So one of the things I like to do too is just give everybody a heads up on what's changed in our grant program from last year to this year. Not a lot has changed this year, but there has been one very important thing that's changed. So one of the things that's changed every year we learn, we try to improve our systems on our end to make it easier, better for you guys as recipients, your experience in the program, as well as to make it a little bit more easier to manage on yours truly. So we've buttoned up a couple of things, really just we've got a few more templates this year. So that's one thing that's changed. The story map and the video that I've been talking about, we've made a couple of tweaks to those as well. So that's just some changes that we've done. But the important thing, the big thing really I got to let you guys know about is this year, when compared to last year, we've got a reduction in the total fund pool this year. Last year, we had $100,000 in the total pool. This year, we've got 50,000. So it was cut in half. Budget constraints, and frankly, my friends, I think because we've had some success with this program. Hopefully, you guys feel the same. Those of you that have participated in it in the past had some success over the past few years. So I think that's why we still have some funding in it this year. So budgets are getting tighter. I'm sure you guys are watching the news. So just yeah, we got about half the funding this year in the total pool than what we did last year. I will tell you this though. We've got some carryover from another external funding source that we were working with last year. I'll give you more info on that in a minute, but we got a little bit more than 50,000, and it's going to have some different strings associated with it. It doesn't mean a lot to you guys. It's just some different things I got to do on my end, but I'll tell you more about that later. And of course, I'd be remiss if I didn't you just give some flowers and tip a hat here real quick. And that is, I'm just super appreciative. We're super appreciative of our county commissioners and our county leadership for really supporting us with this program so that we can support you guys. So I'm happy to get um, funding, even though it is half of last year. Also we work with a number of partner organizations in these things, and just can't tell them thanks enough. And obviously, those of you that have participated in the program in the past, I mean, we can't tell you guys thanks enough, as well. I mean, it's all a partnership. We're all in this things together. So just want to give some thanks there. So let's talk a little bit about eligibility and limitations. So the first thing to know is whether or not your community group or your organization or your neighborhood is eligible to even apply for and receive some funding through this grant program. You'll see on your screen simply eligible applicants include community groups, local nonprofit organizations, and charitable foundations. You might be asking, well, Josh, how do you define community groups? And that's a great question. We keep it somewhat of a loose definition, and really think about it this way. Entities or an entity that is representing a community, that could look a little bit different. It could be a common interest association, like an HOA or a road and rec association. That could be if you live in a neighborhood and you don't have a common interest association, but everybody in your neighborhood is behind this and wants to get together and put in an application, we'll accept that too. And we'll work with you on some of the grant administration things to make these things happen and to find our way to yes. We've had fire departments apply on behalf of a neighborhood before. We've even had like I said, some nonprofit, organizations, some of our watershed coalitions in the county, apply on behalf of a neighborhood. Now, that's something that you guys, we want really you to figure out who that or what that entity is going to be. All we ask is that it's essentially your project is representative of the whole community. So, for example, if you've got 20 houses in your neighborhood, and only 5 of you really are wanting to do this, it's really not going to be a good, adequate representation of the entire community, right? So you can do some things like pass around a petition, and if it shows like a majority of houses in the neighborhood, I think we can work with you on things like that. So the long story short is what constitutes a community group. It's a little bit loose, but if you got any questions about that, just give me a holler, and we're going to do our best in some form or fashion representative of the entire community. And also, it's important to mention that in general, small grassroots community groups that are going to take priority over larger nonprofits, and that is because we really want this to be a ground up, grassroots developed, kind of proposal and effort here. It's really what we're looking for. We're wanting to build, increase that social capital, right? So let me pause there. Any questions on that? Okay. Here's some more important items in terms of eligibility and limitations to our program. Projects have to be located in Larimer County. It's Larimer County tax dollars essentially that are funding this, or the majority of this. So, it's got to be in Larimer County. Projects, they've got to mitigate the risk from one or more hazards. So your project has to, in some way, shape, form, or fashion, mitigate risk in your community. The award ceiling for any individual award, it's usually limited to about $10,000 per project. And really, we put that word in there usually because 10,000 is the top max, but there have been a couple of occasions where we have some cost underruns with other projects maybe, and we, could potentially give a little bit more dollars to another project, even if it's over 10,000. There's a lot of variables in there, but really, I want you guys to walk away from this webinar and hear what I'm saying is really 10,000 is your max per any one project. Here's some things that aren't eligible. Food and drink, food and beverages. That's not an eligible expense, through these funds. Additionally, funding for staff, like if you've got a staff at your HOA and you want to ask for a little bit of money to help pay down their time to coordinate that stuff, that's not going to be eligible. Or staff capacity things, like if you're working with a fire department or working with a nonprofit, and they want to they need to charge a little bit of money to spend time on managing the project, that's not eligible. It's a little bit different if we're paying somebody to do fuels treatment work, right, or vegetation management stuff. That's more paying for a service, right? It's not necessarily staff capacity. Project planning expenses. So if you guys want to buy some software, or if you got some expenses just as y'all get together and plan the proposal before you apply for it, that stuff's not eligible, either. And a big sort of tricky thing that I want to make sure I'm clear about here too is road work. That's not eligible, with essentially one exception. But road work meaning if you're wanting to repair a road or a feature in that road, like a culvert or something like that, or doing maintenance, grading a private road or something like that, those things aren't eligible. However, here's an exception. If you want to cut back tree limbs to ensure emergency apparatus can get in and out, of a community road, or if you want to thin, vegetation on the side of the road, or if you want to pile, slash on the side of the road and then hire a contractor to come chip that slash. Those things are exceptions. We don't necessarily consider that stuff road work. But road work to us is really anything that's touching the surface of the road, or a feature of that road, like a culvert, or some kind of drainage repair, something like that. Let me pause there. Any questions on eligibility of activity?
Yeah, just one. You mentioned, although staffing and project planning is not included, you mentioned something about direct labor, or like in this case, a service that might do the slash pile chipping. If there were contractors that were hired to do specific work for risk mitigation, would that be eligible?
Yes, sir. It sure would, as long as that contractor is not like regrading the road or something, right?
Okay.
Yeah, but that's more paying for a service and not necessarily staff capacity.
Okay, sounds good.
Yep, you bet. Any other questions?
Hey Josh, it's Grant Von Leckerman. I sent you an email about the fire signs and just
You sure
sharing
did.
that with everybody.
Yeah,
That
please
would
do.
be acceptable.
Yep, it sure would. You want to tell everybody what the
The,
idea was?
the small, in some of the rural areas, people like to do all the ornate house numbers, street numbers, where they take a piece of rebar and they bend it. And it's difficult to read if it's marked at all, or they spray paint a tire and hang it on a fence post. So the plan would be is they make some uniform sized green signs that have reflective numbers for house numbers that you can put on the side of the road, on the driveway, that makes it easier to identify the address for like an EMS response or a fire response, or even after an emergency for disaster mapping and recovery efforts.
Yeah, thanks for that. And yep, it's eligible. It's not road work per se, right? And also it's a good idea, especially that retro reflectivity, that high vis signage, especially if it's dark at night or there's a lot of smoke haze. That's going to allow emergency crews to see that address a little bit better. So it's eligible and it's a good idea.
Josh, another
yeah, go ahead.
question on road maintenance. If you have a corner or a road that nothing bigger than a brush truck could get up or around because of a sharp turn or something like that, would it be possible for mitigation to do road work to make that corner more so a larger truck like an engine could get around there? Would that be acceptable if it was well written, or is that just a hard no?
That's a great question, and that's going to be a no.
Okay.
in previous grant cycles, we were able to allow some of those things, but with a lot of grant programs, we just kind of have to update, as we go. And for this year, things like that, yeah, that's not eligible. But that's a great question and a great point. Thanks for bringing that up. The other thing I might mention, just so we can ensure some good clarity around, roads and what's eligible and what's not. Your example about retro reflectivity signage for like address numbers for houses. Think about too, just road signs in general, street names, right? That stuff would be eligible as well, like that high vis, retro reflectivity street name, kind of signage, or evacuation route, markers or something like that. That's eligible, and also, another good idea. So. But thanks, y'all. Good questions. Any other questions about road work, what's eligible, what's not, or just any other activity, what's eligible or what's not? Want to make sure, give you guys some good clarity on that. Okay, hearing none. And of course, as always, if you're not thinking of something now, or you don't want to say it now, or you think about it later, just give me a shout anytime, and happy to talk through, these things with you. All right, here, a couple of more eligibility rule kind of things. So applicants, you can only submit one application or an application for one project per grant cycle. So if Josh's neighborhood, I got 2 project ideas, and so I'll submit one, and then I'll get my neighbor to submit another. That's not allowed. We're really looking at the community, one coming from that community. And I know sometimes there are communities can be layered, essentially, right? You can have a neighborhood that's only along one road or a couple of road. It's in the same technically, the same neighborhood. Let's say it's a larger neighborhood and there's one HOA that serves all of it. We can maybe try to work with you on things. It can't really be the same entity that's managing the grant. But for example, if you had really a separate project on this road or these 2 roads, and it was managed by one entity, and then a half a mile away, a quarter mile away, or whatever, you had another separate that was managed by another entity. That's a little bit of a gray area, but I'm happy to just work with you to try to figure that out. It may not necessarily be the hard what's eligible or not. What if in that is the case, we're also going to be looking at wanting to spread the funds around to different parts of the county. Remember, we only have 50,000 in the total pool per the county operating budget. So, if we've got one giant neighborhood that's submitting, 4 different applications just all on different streets, well, I mean, that's obviously probably what I would do then, y'all, is I'd get all 4 of you on the horn that submitted that, and I'd say, hey, can we work together to figure this out? We can't give everybody, the funds, and we got a lot of other people that we want to try to support too. So we keep this loose, and I know it can be, there's a little gray area to it, but honestly, we want to keep it loose too, because we want to try to find a way, to a yes, to be helpful. Remember, this is a low barrier. We want this thing to be approachable. Also, at the same time, we're going to look out for, everywhere else in the county too. Does that make sense, y'all? Any questions on that? Okay. The next bullet here too is, applicants can only be awarded twice in a 3-year period. So if year 1, you get an award, and year 2, you get an award, then you're not going to be eligible for year 3. And that 3-year period is rolling too. So, and the reason why that is similar, sort of reasoning is we want to help, get that snowball rolling and build the momentum throughout the county, in various corners of the county. Because remember our 2 goals here, it's to reduce risk, mitigate some hazard, but also we want to help increase that social capital a little bit. So there's not enough money to go around, to everybody. So really we try to take efforts to spread and sprinkle it around as best as we can. Any questions on that?
Yeah, in that vein, our HOA was awarded a grant last year. Does that mean we're unlikely or less likely to get a grant this year?
Not necessarily less likely. No. Let me ask you this. Were you awarded the year before also, or is it just
No.
last year?
Just last year.
Yep. No, that's on just at face value. That doesn't necessarily mean that you're, less likely to get the grant.
I mean, are you
Really,
going to take that into consideration or not?
it kind of depends.
I guess that means it's less likely, right?
Yeah, well, I say it kind of depends, and it's a good question, and again, the fact of the matter is, what we see in terms of the volume of applications, it far exceeds to an exponential degree the funding that we're able to give out, right? And so, really, what has more of an impact on anything is just, the quality of the project, and what you write, and not necessarily uh, if you received one last year or not. I mean, that we just don't get to that depth, of consideration, if that makes sense, because those other things, and you'll see, and we'll go over them, the evaluation criteria. That's really what we hang our hat on and there's a team of folks that evaluate these proposals, but that's really what we like to key in on, making sure we're looking at it through that lens, looking at each proposal through that evaluation criteria lens.
Okay.
Yep. And we'll talk more about that in a minute too. That's a great question, Joe. Before I really talk about this slide, I kind of want to hit this point again. It's, I know we could, right, take the stance of making it super black and white. But what that'll do is that will decrease our ability to try to find that way to yes and to be helpful, all things considered. So there's a certain, aspect of gray area, if you will, and really that is for to just so that we can do our best to, help the most with what we got. All right, so here's I referenced this earlier and promised to talk more about it. So this year's fund pool, I mentioned 50,000. That is funding. It's your taxpayer dollars. It's your tax dollars. Mine too. I live in the county, right? But that 50,000 is from our county leadership and is coming from the operating budget of the county. Last year, we received a grant through an external fund source, and we have some money left over from that, and we're going to carry that over into this year. So that's about $15,000 and some change that we've got left over from that grant last year. So in total, the fund pool that we have to work with on this year's community mitigation grants is about 65,000. However, that 15,000 chunk, it's got some different strings tied to it and attached to it. So we've got to manage those a little bit differently. It doesn't really have a big impact on the biggest change. If you are awarded, the application process stays the same. That's no matter what. But if you are awarded, and we pull from that carryover funds from last year's fire shed fund, that was the grant that we got, and award your community, the biggest change for you on your end is that I'm going to ask you to get multiple quotes for if you're whatever you want to use the funds for, and the county pays for that stuff. Whereas the 50,000 from the Larimer County operating budget, that's going to be a reimbursable thing. Also, the 15,000, there are limitations to what we can fund with that, and so really the onus is on us on our end, to manage those things differently, and we'll do so. And we did it last year. It doesn't really change a lot on your end, except for just that how we actually pay for goods and services. There's going to be also, if we apply fire shed fund dollars, to your project, if you're awarded, you'll have an extra little reporting thing that we're going to ask. But our end of project, closeout reports, they're really not they're fairly simple, and so it's not like we're going to ask you to write a dissertation on things. And too, it's probably important for me to mention, y'all, we're always looking for fund partnerships to try to plus up the pool here and to diversify where these funds are coming from. As an example, I'll let you know, last year we applied for the 2025 Fireshed Fund. We received an award through that, but it was a partial amount, not the amount that we applied for. And we're still thankful for it, right? We also submitted a grant application to another grant project program last year to plus up the funds in our community mitigation grant to a large degree, but we just weren't awarded. So we'll keep trying to prospect those opportunities to get more money into this pool. We do it every year. It's really hard to say whether or not any given year will be successful, but we at least try. Any questions on that stuff? All right. So a couple of important links and dates here. All of this stuff is also available, on our webpage. But when you apply through an online form. You can access it through our webpage as well, and we'll walk through it in a minute. A big thing I want you guys to know is that the application period is going to close at 11:59 p.m. on Sunday, March 8th. So if we see that application roll in, and this is one of these black and white things. If we see it roll in at midnight, 12 a.m., March 9, it's not going to be accepted. At some point, we got to cut it off to be fair for everybody, right? So 11:59 p.m., Sunday, March 8th, that's the deadline. The last minute we can accept applications. A little tip of the trick of the trade here is when you go to this application, you'll see a link to a PDF document, and that PDF document, and I'll show it to you. Let me click the link here. You know what? I tell you what, I'm going to show you something else. I'm going to show you the application form and then how to navigate to the PDF link. All right. Okay, here's our web page. Here's that story map link that I posted earlier in the chat. Here is the application form. So you click that, and what we recommend, what I was getting at, is see this link right here, the 2026 CMG Community Mitigation Grant Application Fields PDF document. If you click this, it'll give you a PDF of all of the questions that we ask for on the form, what's required and what's not. And I recommend you build your proposal, your application, separately outside of the online form. That way, just in case something, happens with the internet gremlins there, you didn't lose all that work. Now we want you to apply in the online form, but this maybe is just helpful. So what we're asking for too. You can prepare that stuff. And that way, when you're ready, you can just sit down in the online form and fill it all out. So before we walk through the application, let's see, I got a question. Christina asked, can the $15,000 be awarded to one applicant? That's going to be a no. That's a good question. Remember that maximum really is 10,000 with it's been very rarely, that if it all it's 10,000 and really don't go above that, but maybe it just kind of depends. If we got an underrun somewhere and something happened and they needed a few hundred extra or something like that, but it wouldn't be a lot extra, right? So the answer is no to that, but thanks, Christina, for the question. What I'll say too here, y'all, is the approach that we've taken in the past, few years is because of the volume of applications we get, we really try our best to do what we can for the most. And so for the past couple of years, we provided a lot of partial awards. So if you ask for 10,000, you might only get 5,000, right? We want to try to help everybody that we can to the greatest extent we can. There's a couple of, for the past couple of years, there maybe been a couple of projects where we've given like 9,000, 9,500, 10,000 amount, but most of them, and I'll show you where you can see all the other previous projects. You'll see we give out a lot of partial awards. We feel like that's the right thing to do. Again, we want to sprinkle and spread these things around because, of our ultimate goal here. The goal is to just to build that momentum for the work and to help, all the communities that we can, to the extent that we can, build that social capital. So let's go through the grant application. It's got some important dates on here. It's got some of these eligibility rules that we already went over. You hit next. These are pretty self-explanatory. Project name, just give it a name. Let's say XYZ neighborhood mitigation project. You can even give it a fun name if you want. That's great. Select which hazard your project would apply, how much funding is being requested, and these little red asterisks, right, are required fields. So let's say we want 5,500. The grantee, this is who is that formal entity that's going to manage that grant. And think about it, who is that formal entity who's going to front the bill, right, on the goods or services, and then submit us the paperwork so that we can reimburse them. So let's say this is XYZ neighborhood HOA. I guess I was playing with this earlier and it's got a bunch of letters in here. Put in your name, right? Put in your email address, phone number. If anybody knows that number. Alternate POC. This is my right-hand man. His phone number is something like that. Give us a location of your project. If it's like a single site, fixed site, put in the address, parcel number, an intersection, or you can just say all roads throughout the neighborhood. Just give us some kind of geographic reference so we can put a dot on the map. The scope here, tell us what you want to do with your project. We prefer, a good, adequate description for it. It's not advisable to just put half a sentence in there, right? I mean, tell us, again, you don't have to write a dissertation or anything, but just describe it, to the best extent you can. Budget detail. Here's kind of an important thing. What we're looking for here is just good clarity on what you're wanting the money for. So if in this example, $5,500 is our request, we'll say $500 is for tools like saws and loppers, etc. Saws and loppers and PPE, gloves and masks and all that. And let's just say 5,000 of it is to hire a contractor to then bills in a community space. But again, the goal here really, y'all, is we're just looking for some decent clarity on what you want to spend the money on. If it's an elaborate, project and you got a lot of moving parts and a lot of things that the money's going to go to, and you can also put together a spreadsheet that lines it all out, and you can just email that to me as a supplemental document to your application as well. But we're really just looking for clarity. We're not looking for things like stuff. What does that mean, right? I mean, try to be a little bit clear about it. The need here. Tell us why do you need these grant funds? Is it because your HOA budget has been drawn down, the reserves? Is it there's a significant amount of fuel, loading or buildup, in a community open space? Just give us some information on why you need the funds, right? You back up next to federal lands that hasn't been treated, or it's got a lot of fuel loading. It just give us a little bit info on the need. Now, these questions right here are also important, and these are really primarily how we're going to evaluate the proposals. And so, how will this proposed project contribute to community resilience and risk reduction is one. And then this next question is describe the extent of community involvement and the degree of partnerships for both the proposed project and for work that you guys want to do in the future. Let me give you a trick here. So if you click this link and you scroll down and you see this grant criteria, okay here. See this overall contribution to community resilience and risk reduction as a result of the project, and that's worth 5 points in our scoring system. That's this question, right? So we're telling you exactly what we're wanting to see from you, and we're going to be comparing that to others that might be putting in proposals, right? Here's just a little bit more info as to how you can answer that question. Same with number 2. Community involvement and degree of partnerships for the project and for future. All right, let's go back to the application. This question right here. That's it. And again, we give you a little bit more information as to how you might want to answer that. So we're telling you exactly what we want. Here's another trick and a tip that I'll give you guys. The second question is worth 10 points. The other one's worth 5. So we put more value on this notion of, well, I say we put more value, but this notion of building that social capital, that means a lot, y'all. It really does. And so just pay attention to these things. And this is also very similar to how many other grant, programs are going to have their application process. A part of this grant program too is we want to give you a little bit of experience to set you up for bigger grant projects that you might want to try to get later on and secure later on. So we're trying to help you here, build that capacity in your neighborhood to know how to do these things, right? All right, let's go back to the application. Anything else that's important that you think? Feel free to add it in. We always ask this right here. Now, if you put in a project and you tell us that it's got to cost $10,000, I need $10,000, or we just can't do the project, then that's when you say, when you select no here, right? That you wouldn't or couldn't consider a smaller funding amount than what's being requested. And that's going to go into, remember I told you our calculus of, we're going to take that same approach this year, and we're going to try to help the most that we can to the best extent that we can. But if you do have a project that it's an all or nothing thing, then let us know about it. Let me type in some stuff here so that I can move on to the next. It's not required. Would you consider a smaller funding amount? Yep. So the last thing here is if you've got letters of support from your fire department or from if you got a bunch of signatures, petition style, from folks in your neighborhood, and you've got all that documented. If you've got a forest management plan for your community, if you've got some pictures that you want to show us or a map, anything, that spreadsheet that I told you about earlier that really details your budget, right? Feel free to just email that to me. You've got my email, I'm sure, but it's also right here. We'll take that and we'll put that in your application file, and we'll, consider that in our evaluations. And then you hit submit. Once you hit submit, I should get an auto alert on my end, and I'll do my level best within a couple of days to send you a copy of your application back to you, and also just confirm with you that we've got it. And you can just save that application in your files for your own records if you want. If you submit an application and you don't hear from me, in a couple of days or a week or so, feel free to reach out, and it could just be that I'm slammed with other things, but I'll absolutely get you. We want to get you that record back. That's the application, y'all. Any questions about that application process there? All right, hearing none, let me get back over to the slides, And I know we're getting almost got about 10 minutes, so let me try to breeze through some things, and want to make sure to give y'all plenty of time to ask some questions. Kind of already touched on this before. Successful applicants will demonstrate community support and community engagement with their proposed project. Preference is going to be given to projects that have multiple stakeholders with large community buy-in and participation. So think back to that neighbor. If I'm in a neighborhood of, or that example of if I'm in a neighborhood of 20, homes, and it's really just 5 of us, when we compare that with another neighborhood of 20 homes and everybody's on board, that's going to be part of that calculus too, in addition to that evaluation criterion. But we're trying to give all this information, up front to you so that, you know what we're looking for, right? There's no secrets. Here's those evaluation criteria, we went over. I just, again, another trick of the trade, make sure you, in your proposal, you hit these right here. Very important. Some info on grant administration items. So I mentioned it earlier, but I'll say it again. For that 50,000 chunks, as the general rule, grants are going to be awarded on a reimbursement basis, right? That means that if you're awarded, you would buy the goods, you would pay for the services, or your entity, the HOA, or however you're doing it, you pay for it and then submit to us substantiating documentation for that financial claim, which means a receipt or an invoice and a proof of payment or a zero balanced invoice, something that shows us you said you were going to buy this. Yep, you bought that, and that was the amount that you said, and now I see proof that those funds actually left an account, right? Or you actually paid for it. Once we get those things, with your final report, right, and some pictures, and then we'll give you a reimbursement. And we have a net 30 policy. Typically, y'all, generally it is less than 30 days when we get all the things that we need from you. It'll be less than 30 days when we get that back to you. And what we'll probably do is we'll mail you a check to that entity that's managing those funds and that paid for that. If you are selected for an award, then before you can spend any money, right, then we're going to have like a little agreement. It's just a simple 1-pager that basically says, I promise to play by the grant rules. You got to sign it. Once we get that, once we receive it, that is your agreement with us. And at that point, you'll get, from me, hey, I received, and you're good to spend money, at that point. But we're going to have an agreement before you can spend money and get reimbursed from us. Another thing too that we've that's important to us is after you get the award, and let's say now we have that agreement, that you sign and you send back. Another rule that we have, and there's going to be a list of rules too, and this is one of them, is we want you to have a community meeting and talk about your project. Now, this doesn't mean that you have to have a standalone meeting that you're only talking about the project. You can add it to the agenda of your HOA meeting or something like that. It's just the intent of this rule is, and you got to let us know about the meeting ahead of time, if preferably. One, because we want to try to support you and the effort. And so we'll try to be there if we can, either myself or one of our colleagues from our office to support the effort. But also the intent of this rule is we just want to make sure that everyone in the community essentially has been communicated with about the project and that you're doing your best to try to spread that word and make sure folks are aware of the project. Does that make sense? Okay. Another important item, if you get an award, if we award you and we have that agreement, that contract, right? And you get going on your projects, and then about halfway through you realize, this this type of widget we thought we wanted, but we actually need another type of widget, or we don't need a widget at all. We need something else entirely. So that's changing your scope, which is not a huge deal. It happens, right? Just let us know beforehand and just tell us, and so that I can give you an approval. Okay, yep, that's different from your original project proposal, but that's still eligible. No big deal. What I'll do is I'll just update that one-pager agreement that we have, get you to sign it and send it back, and now we're all clear on the paperwork, and you can get that scope change. If you're not sure if something is eligible or not, a good or a service, always feel free to shout, and we'll talk through it. And we'll do our best to find that way to yes. The other thing that we ask for too is really to help tell the story of not just your project, but this program, excuse me, in general. And also it helps in our efforts to try to get other funding, for the program. We want to see pictures or videos, ideally before, during, and after, the project. But we just want to see some of that. Picture tells 1,000 words, right? Picture is worth more than 1,000 words. So, help us tell, your story and tell the program story on the whole. Another big important thing too, any project work that's going to be happening on private property, not necessarily community property. Obviously, the community HOA and leadership ought to be aware of stuff happening on the community property, right? But certainly if it's on private property, then you've got to get permission from that property owner, right? That will allow you to do work on their property. It's really more to protect you guys. And I'm happy to send you some examples of what some other folks have done to include just like little like permission letters, right? That you'll get them to sign if you want. It's really just to make sure that you guys, in the name of the program, aren't just going on to somebody's property without them know about it. It's pretty common sense stuff, but just know that's important, obviously. And of course, at any point in time, we kind of reserve that right to get some info from you if we need, to also include, hey, we really need to come take a look at your project. And just that's part of the rules at that agreement that you sign, and that you allow us to do so. Any questions about any of that stuff? Okay, I'm not going to go through the story map. You know what? Yes, I will, real quick, because I want to show you something. So I know we're getting close to time. All right, this story map right here. This is a helpful. You can watch that video, but if you want some ideas as to what other communities or neighborhoods have done in the past, their kinds of projects, go to this story map and you can get some ideas and see what others have done. Springfield HOA, there in Fort Collins, last year they did a wildfire and flood project. This is a picture of their community meeting. You see some volunteers. What they were doing is working on a 5-acre community open space that hadn't been maintained in a while. So they were removing that dead and down, removing some of that vegetative litter in there, because they wanted to mow it, right? And kind of restore it to native grasses and all those things. They chipped some of that stuff up, so rented a chipper. There's the mower. They actually purchased the mower with our grant funds. Let me stop. Anybody from Springfield on the line? Okay, I don't think so. They did a great job with the project, and a number of folks do. Everybody does. The cool thing here is they also had a concrete drainage pan there in that open space, so they cleared it all out to allow better stormwater drainage. There's a picture of the after. Looks a lot different from what it was before. They purchased a Connex container, a little shipping container, and acquired some tools so that they could maintain that space, in the years to come, including a mower. All that stuff was funded through a grant. So that's just an idea of a project, but also if you keep scrolling, there's a map here and a list of all the other projects in the past 4 years. This map, you can kind of breeze around and get ideas and see pictures, and look at just what others have done. Let's see. Here's last year's kind of a tour of last year's projects. Also, y'all, it is 7 p.m. So I'm happy to stay on and kind of continue on and take some questions, but I also want to acknowledge, people's time. If you got to get, feel free to jump, and just know we'll hang this recording on our webpage after. Also, of course, always feel free to reach out. But I'll continue on for those of you that want to stay on.
Thank you, Josh.
Yep, you bet. So again, just give you some ideas of what others, have done in this last year. So feel free to browse this if it helps you get some ideas, and certainly to know like what might be eligible or what, what isn't. Let me scroll through here real quick. Remember us talking about the science earlier? Here's that big 500, 600 page report, for some light reading. And here's also kind of a TED Talk thing that talks about the importance of social capital in our work, and some testimonials and endorsements from partner agencies, leadership, and community members themselves. Maybe some of you guys, or some of your neighbors who participated in it with us. Jump back to the slide, and I think I'm getting close to wrapping up, and so I definitely want to offer some time for questions here, y'all. Okay, important dates. We opened the application period January 12th. Remember, the application period is going to close at 11:59 p.m. Sunday, March 8th. Once they close, then we need a period of time to evaluate those. There's a team of evaluators. We do it separately, and then we come together. So we just need a period of time to work through those things. But after we do that and we make our final selections, then we'll reach out to those of you that we awarded, and those of you that we can award if we have those, to let you know. You'll hear from me, and then we'll announce it on before May 4th. We'll hang the award announcements on our webpage and things like that. I mentioned earlier at the top of the webinar here, this grant program cycled annually, right? So do the application at the front of the year, make the award announcements by May 4th. And by the time you sign that grant agreement, that's when you can begin your work, right? Or make those purchases, spend that money to get reimbursed. But we want everything closed out by November 1st, because on the back end of the year, we need some time to button everything up. Our fiscal year is the same as the calendar year. So it's nice to have a little bit of time around the holidays to button everything up. So all of your projects got to be totally complete, not just work done, but all the documentation submitted to us, the final report, everything's got to be done by November 1st, 11:59 p.m. November 1st. If it's not, then you run the risk of potentially not receiving reimbursement or not being eligible, in the next year or perhaps future year. So we really got to pay attention to these and run tight with these deadlines. Okay, all that said, man, I talked for a whole hour, y'all. What questions do you guys have? Any questions? Or also, I invite any of you that may have participated or been a recipient of our grant program in years past. Love to hear from you, and I bet others who haven't participated might want to hear from you too. Thanks, Marcia. Thanks, Elizabeth. I must have done a good job explaining everything.
You did an awesome job, Josh.
Well, thanks. Well, seriously, if something comes to mind, as you're working with your neighbors and as you're, putting your proposal together, again, always feel free to give me a shout, and happy to, talk with you about anything and work with you on stuff. So never hesitate to shout.
Great. Josh, thanks. Brad Bowman here with the Sundance Condominium Association up in Estes Park. And
Yeah, hey, Brett.
my first time attending this meeting, so it was very helpful. And we're looking forward to working with you further. So thanks a lot.
Yeah, awesome. Glad it was helpful, Brad. Yep. Appreciate that.
Thanks,
have a great-
Josh. And for the newcomers, Josh is as helpful as you could ever imagine. So it really was a great experience we had last year with him. So thank you
Awesome.
very much.
Yeah, well, thanks for that, Ed. I feel like that's a kind words. That's appreciate that. Happy to help.
If you're at all afraid of doing a grant application, this is the most straightforward, easy one I've ever seen in my life. So that's a shout out to the county for what they've done and your administration.
Awesome. Well, that's great feedback, Ed. Really appreciate that. And that's our aim. You know, we want to help try to build capacity, you know, for these things. So that's great. Thank you for that. Well, all right then. No other questions. It's great to spend a little time with you guys this evening. I hope you found this helpful. I'm glad you found it helpful. And again, never hesitate to shout. So
Absolutely.
with that, with that being said, I'll go ahead and end the webinar. You guys have a great night.
Thank you
Thank
so
you.
much, Josh.
Good night.
Thanks, Josh.
Bye-bye.